Thanks, Fred. I mean, you covered the subject so well. I'm not quite sure what we're going to do on this panel here, but I know we have two more here. This is Jason and Sam. Maybe do intros from Jason, what we're doing over there at Riot, and of course, you have some kind words from people already for what you're doing with the mining and such.
Well, I think you covered it. Jason Less, CEO of Riot Platforms, publicly traded Bitcoin miner in the United States.
Cool. And then Sam?
Yeah, Sam Tabar, CEO of Bit Digital, tickers at BTBT on NASDAQ. We have operations in Iceland, Canada, and the US.
Very good. We're in Canada, because I'm kind of from there.
We try to...
Somewhere cold?
Somewhere cold.
Okay, very good. So let's talk about, remember early on when we went to these conferences, it was always, oh, Bitcoin's not efficient, it's very, very bad for the environment and all this. It's 0.6 to 2.3% of the world's energy use, or wherever that number is. You guys probably know it a heck of a lot better than I do. But, and now I noticed that we've kind of gone from, before we used to not talk about hedge funds, we talked about alternative investments. Now we're talking about Bitcoin necessarily. We're talking about how the energy harvesting is happening. So how, maybe Sam, we'll start with you. How does your process differentiate and really play to the strengths of what Bitcoin can produce and the energy used to do the mining?
Yeah, with respect to the energy use, our fleet is 93% carbon free. I do believe that the environmental arguments against the sector is somewhat disingenuous. We can get into that later if you wish. But I feel that the sector will not really be green until investors demand it. So if investors make it clear to Bitcoin miners that it's okay to pay a premium on carbon-free sources of power and be rewarded for an increased market cap as a result, then the industry will become green. If investors are simply looking at costs, then Bitcoin miners will be just driven to the lowest and the cheapest cost of power regardless of that source of power.
And Jason, how about your side with Riot?
So Riot has really focused on the utility scale model that Fred was talking about earlier. We operate two very large sites in Texas. The second has just now come online. But our first site in Rockdale, we have been very proactive in the demand response game. We essentially own a huge chunk of the energy that we use. We don't own it because we produced it, but because we entered into long-term agreements to use that energy. That has given us a low, fixed, predictable cost, and the utility, the generators, have a predictable off-taker of that energy for a period of time. So what we essentially do is use this excess energy and make that energy available to the grid in periods of peak demand. These are very limited periods, but we live in a society where energy is needed all the time. There's a standard of living cannot be satisfied by, at least in the United States and most of the Western world, of shutting off power for different periods of the day. Most industrial loads cannot do that. Bitcoin mining is the unique large industrial load that can shut off at any time, has not lost the work that it did before, and then can resume operations when the power demand has subsided. So by doing this, we work closely with our grid operator, and we help stabilize frequency in that grid. And for doing this, we are essentially arbitraging power as well, which has led to us having a very low cost to mine. And that helps us accomplish our ultimate goal of accumulating Bitcoin at a discount to its market price.
Right. And then Fred, your presentation said a ton there, but a question I had from that too is like, if you said that it's going to this long tail of being very like down to the Tesla walls and such, how would your shop, Marathon, take advantage of that? Because you have your own data centers, would it be like some sort of farming or giving them the computing power? Or?
It's why we have a technology division.
Yeah.
So we co-founded the only US ASIC developer for Bitcoin miners called Auradine, together funded by Mayfield and Celesta, two of the most prestigious VC firms in Silicon Valley. We took the semiconductor design team from Palo Alto Networks, which is one of the top technology companies in Silicon Valley, and designed ASICs. The first product was a 4 nanometer design. The current product that'll ship later this year is a 3 nanometer design. Same geometry is used in Apple cell phones, for example. So state of the art with very efficient performance, but most importantly, designed with Bitcoin miners in mind and the needs of Bitcoin miners around total cost of ownership, fault tolerance, the ability to lose ASICs on a hash board without the hash board going down. All these things you need to be able to do to be able to operate on a Tesla Powerwall, because you can't have a technician there on site watching it in case it goes offline.
True.
And the whole software stack. So we view ourselves as a very diversified business.
And how about, you mentioned the cost of Bitcoin. Are you at the cost of zero? Or how's your costing?
No, I mean, today, absolutely not. I mean,
Yep.
we are sitting in the same boat as kind of the vast majority of other large-scale miners. But we believe over time, and by the next halving in 2028, you have to have costs that are at or below 2 cents a kilowatt hour to be able to mine efficiently. And so finding ways to mine with zero cost is a way to offset some of your higher cost energy.
Does that take into account the externalities like growing tomatoes and such, or is that?
Well, no, that's it. So I'll give you an example. Shrimp farming generates a 20% net profit over and above the energy side of it, right? So, if you provide energy to the shrimp farm, they pay you back in profits from their business as well. So it's a very interesting, as you look at energy being the core of everything everybody does, think about it, 50% of energy used by industry is used to heat things. That's a huge TAM. You just have to have a little bits of that every here and there, and you have a billion-dollar business. So
How about your side, Sam, for your costing?
Well, we're a little bit different. Not many people in this room know that we have the largest AI business of all the public listed Bitcoin miners. We've locked in 150 million of revenue that's paid every month over the next 3 years. In fact, we just announced doubling the size of that business. So by far, we're the leader in that business. And we like that. We love that business. The margins are very fat. They're fatter than Bitcoin mining was, even on a pre-halving basis. Wow. And the energy use is actually quite good in the sense that we can produce, takes 90% less energy to produce the same revenue in AI versus Bitcoin mining. And I know that Fred mentioned earlier that it costs about $10 to $20 million per megawatt, but you don't have to do that. In fact, for us, it was zero, because you partner up with existing data centers and you negotiate a fee. And so that way you can reduce the costs and crystallize these very fat margins on the AI business. So you don't really have to spend that kind of money on the infrastructure.
Wow. How about you, Jason? You guys pure play, or you got something else happening too?
We are a pure play Bitcoin miner, and maybe expanding on what I spoke about earlier, what we do with demand response. So we own these blocks of power at a price, and when the spot price of power in our grid is exceptionally higher than Bitcoin mining, we are opting to pause our Bitcoin mining operations and instead sell the power that we own back into that grid. Now, the decision is typically not a close one. Bitcoin mining revenue, well, right now, after the halving, without transaction fees, it's quite poor. But if you just say on average, you're looking at $100 a megawatt hour, if you equate Bitcoin mining revenue on a per megawatt hour basis, we typically don't see power trading around 100. It's well below 100, or it's $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a megawatt hour. So the decision is very clear. So when you see these peak periods of volatility in at least the Texas grid where we operate, typically in Q3, we earn quite a bit of offsets to our power bill by participating in that trading game. So all together with that and our direct cost on the ground there, our cost per coin for 2023 at least was about $7,500 per coin. That's over the average of the whole year, though. That includes the power strategy that's very focused in Q3, and it's also before the halving and before network difficulty has gone up so substantially over the past 12 months. So I think it's going to be a quite interesting time for the industry right now because of the halving, because of how Bitcoin mining economics have been so strained. And we're really going to start to see who are those low-cost producers that can navigate through these turbulent waters, and who are those that have some changes to be made.
And how does you mention in the pre-call the ERCOT, which I thought was a sitcom from the 80s, but the Energy Reliability Council of Texas, Energy Texas, they go together. But how does that affect what you're doing?
I didn't hear the first part. The ERCOT grid?
The ERCOT grid, yeah.
So the ERCOT, Texas is a deregulated energy market, and it's unique in that it's specifically all within Texas. So you have an energy island. It's because it's a massive state with so much industry, people, generation, natural resources, high potential for renewable generation. You have a lot of energy going on there. However, there's a lot of renewable energy. Now, that's a great source of energy when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. That does not always match up with demand, though, and that's when you see these periods of volatility with power when the sun is setting, but consumer demand is still there, and that drives the spot price of power up. So we participate in a number of programs with the ERCOT operator in Texas, and we work closely with them and help provide a lot of research for what they do. And I believe that they truly see and value the presence of Bitcoin mining there in Texas. Another thing that we do is participate in something called ancillary services. And you can think of that as selling an insurance contract to the grid where we are giving ERCOT the ability to control our load. We tell them the hours and how much load on a day-ahead basis that we're willing to participate in this program and the price that we'll do it at. That gives them a tool that they can use to balance grid frequency. Because no other large load can let a grid operator typically do that. Hey, we want you to keep running or not running. And it's not always not running. Sometimes there are periods where you would otherwise want to curtail, but they need you to keep running to balance grid frequency in that specific part of the grid. By doing this, Bitcoin miners are actually lowering the cost of energy in markets like ERCOT because it's consumers that are ultimately paying for those ancillary services.
Yeah.
Coal peaker plants, batteries, they don't want bid as low as Bitcoin miners because they have higher cost. So Bitcoin miners are in here helping stabilize the grid, give grid operators tools to accomplish that, and lowering energy volatility and pricing as a result.
Well, speaking of islands, you're in Iceland, so how is it different there maybe from, how does it work with Iceland? Is it very well regulated by the state, and how did you guys start?
Yeah, Iceland is 100% renewable.
Yeah, it's all geothermal typically?
It's all geothermal and hydro. So we have a Bitcoin mining site near Reykjavik, and that's our Bitcoin mining operations. And our HPC business is in the north part of Iceland, nowhere near where the volcano is.
High performance computing, as you might say.
Yes,
Yeah.
HPC, high performance computing or AI. And we have that located in a very remote part in Iceland.
You won't say where, of course, yeah. But
I mean, we actually disclose that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's our strategy for that country, and it's completely geothermal and hydro. So we're pretty happy about that.
How's the pricing?
The pricing is actually not as it's like it depends on the business. It varies, but it's not much more than the average, the industry average. But the HPC business is very much apples and oranges compared to the Bitcoin mining business when you look at pricing, and we've been very comfortable with the pricing. Here's the thing about the HPC business: we don't have to care so much about the pricing of the energy like Bitcoin mining, because the margins are so fat. And because we have this HPC business that more than covers our G&A, more than covers our fixed costs, even if we made no money in Bitcoin mining over 3 years, we'd still be quite profitable. That's a position we wanted to be in, to win in all weathers.
Yeah. And Fred, you've been nodding through everything. I feel like you know both theirs and your businesses quite well. So how would you compare to these two?
Well, I think, as I described before, we're kind of operating in 3 different realms of diversified businesses. The utility scale mining, similar to Jason's model, energy harvesting, which is fairly unique, and then a technology business, which is really all about leveraging technology to make even AI more efficient. And we have our immersion technologies being evaluated by AI OEMs now as a way to get that power density and cool, which on-chip cooling doesn't provide power density. Right? So I think that everybody's approaching this in different ways. Everybody is identifying what business model works best for them, and I think you'll see lots of different strategies. HPC, I think, is a race right now. I think the hyperscalers will win it, and they'll win it with spades because they have capital, they have experience, and they have the government clout to get it done. The single biggest lobby working against Bitcoin miners today is the AI industry. They're funding huge efforts in Washington, D.C. to try and get laws and regulators to view AI as a better use of power. Talon Energy recently did this deal with Amazon, AWS, $650 million for 650 megawatts or something like that. And nuclear energy, 2.1 cents, green energy that otherwise could have been used for Bitcoin miners.
Yeah, I do have to mention something about the hyperscalers that Fred mentions a lot. So we actually win our businesses from clients who were with the hyperscalers. These hyperscalers are building their own LLMs. our clients don't want to be in bed with people who are building a competitive product. So we've actually been able to build this giant business, again, the biggest one in the sector, winning business from the hyperscalers because they have a conflict of interest building their own LLMs with the clients that are building the same product. So there is actually a huge opportunity in the ecosystem to win against. We're not trying to win against the hyperscalers. We're winning business from clients who don't want to be in bed with the hyperscalers. There's a huge market for that, and we're proving it. We're proving it.
Love it. And you mentioned regulations, so everybody's in different jurisdictions. How do regulations affect what you're doing? Like you have the Texan ones and such, or is that a challenge or an opportunity, or how's that playing out?
Regulation is definitely a challenge when you have the President of the United States trying to put a 30% energy tax on Bitcoin mining specifically. You have countries like Sweden who repeal their tax abatement for data centers and then go and fine people operating in the spaces. Countries like Iceland, where the minister has said that they want to take energy use away from other things other than food because they want to be food independent. So no matter where you operate, whether it's a very developed country or an undeveloped country, you have to deal with government regulation and risk. Sometimes it helps you, sometimes it doesn't. And certainly in Texas, I know Jason and I have both experienced some of the challenges that exist in that state. But we think that longer term, the good side of Bitcoin mining will win out, and people will see the light and understand the benefits we provide to the grid.
The value proposition of Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining specifically is so clear. And we don't need special regulation or rules or assistance from the government to be successful. We simply are just playing by the same rules that have been laid out by everyone else. With reference, playing off Fred's point, there is a whole of government attack from the Biden administration onto Bitcoin. Bitcoin mining is just part of that. You can look at so many different parts of this administration that is going after the Bitcoin and the broader digital asset ecosystem. Why? I don't know. We can come up with lots of theories, but it's not productive. It's not to the benefit for the citizens and residents of the United States, and it's ultimately driving business elsewhere. You know, I know Marathon historically has had all its operations in the United States and has recently launched a plan to put 50% of its operations overseas over the next few years. Why? Obviously a rhetorical question. So this industry as a whole has a lot of work that we have to do in the education and advocacy space. And the good news is so much of us worked so well together in accomplishing this. We have a shared objective. We understand that together we're stronger than we are alone, and it's a cohesive message that's required. And I think we are seeing good results for this. I think there are many regulators and lawmakers, the local, state, and federal level, who understand Bitcoin mining. Understand Bitcoin. Earlier this year, the Energy Information Agency, a part of the Department of Energy in the United States, launched this very unlawful survey to try and collect all this information around Bitcoin miners with one objective, probably to justify a 30% tax. And in the wake of that, we saw lawmakers defending Bitcoin mining on X, Twitter, writing letters to these agencies, pushing back against this type of government overreach. And I think it's a testament to what we as an industry have done in an education and advocacy effort. And as the result of that, we as an industry came together, industry group, and then Riot as a co-plaintiff, and we litigated against the federal government against the survey, and we got it stopped. That's an example of this industry working together. And I think any government overreach should know that if they're going after this industry, they are going to be met with opposition, and no one's going to roll over easy.
Love it. Yeah, and how about yours? Like you said,
Well,
overseas, over lakes. How was Canada doing?
I don't have that much faith in the rationality of politicians. Many years ago, BitDigital had its fleet in China. Entire fleet was in China. And we felt that was a jurisdictional risk. And we started to migrate our entire fleet. And this is before the ban on Bitcoin mining in China, which is effectively what Biden is doing. A 30% tax is effectively a ban on the sector, same thing. So, 6 months before China announced the ban, we felt this is a risk. This is weird.
Yeah.
And people thought we were
Spidey
paranoid.
senses tingling, yeah.
Yeah. And so we moved the entire fleet, migrated that entire fleet. Vice actually did a documentary on it. It's quite funny. But we migrated the entire fleet from China into the United States during COVID, which was not an easy feat. And thank God we did that, because China announced a ban on Bitcoin mining, which is not rational. So I don't know if the US is going to follow suit. A tax is the same thing effectively as banning the industry. And that's one of the reasons why we don't own our own infrastructure, because we want to be infrastructure light. If we owned our infrastructure in China, we'd be screwed. Yeah. We were able to take our machines, we're nimble, take the machines and pull them out. And today we have 7 operating partners, and we create competitive tension with those partners, and we're able to get out of one of the operating partners and go into a better operating partner. Why? For economics, or if there's a jurisdictional risk. We can do that. We could easily move out. If you own your own infrastructure, you can't easily do that. Now, infrastructure is interesting if it has more than one use. If you have just Bitcoin mining, I feel that's an existential risk if Biden wins. But if you could have that place used as an HPC business or some other business, then there's still value in infrastructure. That's a position we've taken. I realize it's unique, but I believe the paranoia survives.
Love it. Yeah, Andy Grove, yeah, only the paranoid. Yeah. So how about kind of far-reaching, they're going through this 4-year cycle for the halving and such. Obviously, CapEx changes. You probably don't have too much to say on that one because you're very nimble. But how does it work with regard to, you get the same amount of Bitcoin, but fees? Like I think now it's about 3/4 of what miners are making is in fee revenue, and just profitability. What's that cycle like, and has it changed over the last few cycles, or is it relatively similar? It's actually maybe more my question than, but
yeah, I mean,
really want to see what's going on.
If you look at, there were a couple of instances last year where fees exceeded the block subsidy because of ordinals and the BRC-20 launch. We had runes at this halving, which I think there were a couple blocks we won that had 18 Bitcoin in fees when the block subsidy was 3. But there are other things that you can do. So the goal is that fees will eventually grow beyond it. So we've built some layer 2 technologies, one product service called Slipstream, which essentially lets somebody who wants to transact on the Bitcoin blockchain reserve space in a block. Oh. So think of it like with an airline, a wholesale travel company can buy seats on airplanes on every flight that goes, and has an option to use them. Similar model, so financial institutions can reserve block space. We did a study looking at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, and if you were to design the optimal block, assemble the maximum value of transactions you could, typically the average pools out there that orchestrate what Bitcoin miners do, the third-party pools, operated at about 98% of the maximum value. Our pool, which is a proprietary pool, up through the end of last year, was about 2% higher than the optimum. Beginning of this year, we're 7.6% higher than the optimum block, and the third-party pools are 2.6 to 3.2% below the optimum block. So what that tells us is we're earning 10% more in fees than everybody else because of that. We've also brought out a technology called Enduro, which is an open-source technology that lets anybody build applications on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. There's a lot of development activity going on, and I think as people get more involved at layer 2, that's where Bitcoin mining kind of really will start to shine, as basically as we build the ecosystem for more transactions, there'll be more fees that'll go to the miners, that'll cover the security budget, and then as mining goes down through its long tail, again, it'll be a very secure industry long term.
Very common question that I'm sure we all get is, what are you going to do after all the Bitcoin is mined? And first it's like, okay, don't worry, that's not until 2140. But transaction fees is the bigger part of that answer. And we're seeing lots of volatility in that over the past year or so. We've seen these periods of huge transaction fees, like Fred mentioned, around the halving earlier this year, in the middle of last year. So that activity takes off and then it subsides, but it shows the direction that Bitcoin mining rewards are going. Bitcoin mining blocks have a fixed amount of space. As there's more demand for scripts and signatures to be included in those blocks, there's more vibrant market of fees. That's what we as miners benefit from, and that's going to be the core focus of block rewards going forward.